In a dramatic moment that will be studied for years, the Supreme Court delivered a historic ruling this week. The justices blocked the Trump administration's sweeping tariff proposal, sending shockwaves through Washington and around the world. The decision, split 6-3, marks one of the most significant checks on executive authority and trade policy in modern history. Legal experts and political leaders alike are still absorbing the implications of the court's move. Some call it a watershed moment for the balance of power between the White House and Congress. Others see it as a needed course correction after years of escalating trade tensions. Either way, the Supreme Court's intervention signals a new era for how America governs its economic relationships. This ruling came in response to months of debate and legal challenges over President Trump's latest effort to impose tariffs on goods from major trading partners. It was a case that tested constitutional boundaries and economic wisdom alike. Now, with the court's decision, the rules of the game have changed, perhaps permanently. At the heart of this legal drama were tariffs, taxes on imported goods that President Trump sought to enact unilaterally. Trump has long argued that high tariffs are necessary to protect American industries and workers from what he calls unfair foreign competition. His new proposal targeted over $150 billion in goods, including automobiles, electronics, and steel. Critics were quick to argue that Trump's plan would ignite trade wars and hurt American consumers. The policy was especially controversial because it bypassed Congress, relying instead on broad interpretations of executive power under the Trade Expansion Act and related laws. Supporters praised the tough stance, saying it would force trading partners to negotiate better deals. The proposed tariffs would have been among the largest in United States history. They drew sharp rebukes from business groups, foreign governments, and economists alike. Many feared retaliation from China, the European Union, and other key allies. Meanwhile, several U.S. industries, especially those reliant on global supply chains, warned of higher costs and potential layoffs. Amid this clamor, the legal question loomed large. Could the president really impose such sweeping tariffs without congressional approval? The answer, it turns out, would come from the highest court in the land. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods, meant to raise revenue or protect domestic industries. Raising tariffs makes foreign goods more expensive, helping U.S. products compete, but often raising prices for everyone. Tariffs have always sparked debate in American policy. The Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930, for example, worsened the Great Depression. Yet, some argue targeted tariffs can help new industries grow. Today, experts warn that broad tariffs disrupt supply chains and slow growth. The public debate is fierce. Some see tariffs as job protection. Others fear higher prices. The Supreme Court's decision reframes the debate, reminding us that trade policy is a constitutional question. The legal fight over Trump's tariff plan began almost immediately after its announcement. Industry groups in several states filed lawsuits arguing that the president had overstepped his authority. They pointed to Article 1 of the Constitution, which grants Congress, not the president, the power to regulate commerce and levy taxes. Lower courts initially offered mixed responses. Some judges sided with the administration, citing national security exceptions. Others argued that the tariffs were too sweeping to qualify under existing statutes. Legal analysts described the case as a clash of titans over the separation of powers. When the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, it signaled the stakes were high. In its majority opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote, "While the executive may act swiftly in emergencies, the power to impose broad tariffs on peacetime imports belongs to Congress." The ruling emphasized the limits of presidential authority, especially in the absence of a clear national security threat. The minority dissented sharply, warning that the court's decision could hinder the president's ability to respond to urgent economic or security challenges. But for now, the majority view stands. Sweeping trade measures require congressional debate and approval. Markets reacted instantly to the Supreme Court's ruling. The Dow Jones jumped 400 points, reflecting relief among investors worried about a trade war. Technology and manufacturing stocks stabilized on the news. Over 60% of Chamber of Commerce members had been planning for higher costs under Trump's tariffs. The court's decision allowed many to breathe easier. Global markets also welcomed the decision, with the euro and yuan strengthening slightly. For Congress, it's a wake-up call to take its responsibilities more seriously. The Supreme Court's decision marks a bold reset in the balance of power. For decades, Congress has gradually ceded more authority to the executive branch, especially in emergency situations. This ruling reasserts Congress's primary role in shaping trade policy. Lawmakers from both parties quickly weighed in. Senator Susan Collins said, "This restores constitutional order. Congress must debate and decide on major economic measures." Democrats echoed this sentiment, with Senator Sherrod Brown adding, "We can't leave something as important as trade to executive whim." In practical terms, the decision means that future presidents of any party will need Congress's explicit approval for sweeping tariffs. This could slow decision-making, but it also increases transparency and invites broader debate. Some fear gridlock. Others see it as a vital safeguard. For Congress, the challenge now is to craft trade policies that reflect both national interests and global realities. The Supreme Court has set the stage, but the next moves belong to lawmakers. The effects of the Supreme Court's decision will be felt far beyond Washington. Multinational companies, already coping with years of trade uncertainty, are scrambling to assess what comes next. For many, the ruling means a reprieve from sudden, unpredictable tariff hikes. American automakers, who rely on complex international supply chains, welcome the news. "This decision gives us the stability we need to invest and hire," said Mary Barra, CEO of General Motors. The National Retail Federation echoed these sentiments, noting that consumers will likely avoid large price increases on everyday goods. Foreign governments also reacted. China's Ministry of Commerce issued a rare statement praising the court's commitment to the rule of law. European leaders called for renewed trade talks, hoping for a more predictable negotiating partner. Still, uncertainty remains. Companies must now watch Congress for clues on future trade policy. For workers and consumers, the hope is for policies that balance protection with affordability and access to global markets. As the dust settles, it is clear that the Supreme Court's decision is more than a single ruling. It is a turning point. The case connects constitutional law, economic policy, and global diplomacy in ways that will shape America's future for years. Transitions between old and new ways of making trade policy are never easy. For the Trump administration's supporters, the decision is a setback. For critics, it's a victory for process and accountability. For Congress, the ruling is both a challenge and an opportunity. Businesses and investors will need to adapt. They must now engage more actively with lawmakers and prepare for a legislative process that may be slower, but also more inclusive and predictable. As America recalibrates its approach, the world watches. Every shift in U.S. trade policy sends ripples across the global economy. The Supreme Court's decision is only the beginning of a larger conversation. In summary, the Supreme Court's decision to block Trump's tariff proposal is a defining moment for American governance. It reaffirms Congress's central role in trade policy and sets new limits on presidential power. The economic, legal, and political impacts are vast and will unfold in the months and years ahead. Markets have stabilized, businesses are reassessing their strategies, and foreign partners are adjusting their expectations. For Congress, the challenge is clear: to build a trade policy that is both strong and fair, responsive to voters but also mindful of global realities. As Dr. Tyson observed, the court's decision is a call to action for lawmakers. The open question now is whether Congress can rise to the occasion and define a new era in U.S. trade relations. Will America's next steps protect jobs and industries while keeping products affordable, or will gridlock and partisanship stall progress? The world waits to see what the future holds for U.S. trade policy, and so do we.